from 4th to 8th mantra, they are talking of the nature of the self. So this is the most important part of the Upanishad. How are they describing the self? Please see each word. Anejadekaṃ. Anejat means that which is motionless. Ejat means to shake. Anejat means that which does not shake. Motionless, or you can say immutable, that which is not given to mutation. And ekam, it is one, it is the motionless one. Manaso javīyo. Javīyo is actually faster, and it is faster than the mind, they are saying. The self is faster than the mind. We will go into these ideas, but first the word meaning. Deva enat na āpnuvan. The senses, that is why, cannot reach this. Pūrvamarṣat. Yasmat pūrvamarṣat, because it exists before the senses and the mind. Tat tiṣṭhat, it being steady. Taddhāvato'nyānatyeti, it outstrips the other objects which are running. Tasmin sati, it being present. Mātariśvā, the cosmic energy or cosmic prana. Dadhāti, all the activities of the cosmic prana are sustained by this self. So what are they trying to tell us in this description? See, the self is one, ekam. Then it is unmoving. What is it that is actually moving? See, in your own system, now you will apply the whole thing to your system and study it. I told you it should be first person research, then only you will come to self-knowledge. What is moving in us? The jnanendriyas and karmendriyas are very motile, isn't it? Moving all the time. Your eyes are moving, your body is moving, even though you may be sitting, okay, there is slight movement. And then your mind, of course you're thinking, so there's a lot of movement in the mind. All of these are moving, but the self is not moving. Your awareness is always a constant. Everything else, they are variables. The only invariable in your experience is the self, because your awareness does not move. Then why does it appear sometimes that there is more awareness, sometimes less awareness? Because you are only talking of the awareness in your mind, that which is reflected in your mind. So that awareness can fluctuate according to the density of your mind. But pure awareness in itself does not move, does not mutate. It is fixed. In fact, its reflection in the mind and the movement of the mind makes it appear to move. But in its own real nature, it is immovable, it is motionless. So this is what they are saying. And it is faster than the mind. Why do they say this? Does it walk? Does it have speed? Why they are saying this is, wherever your mind goes, you know, it's only in awareness that you perceive through the mind. It is already there, that is why. Awareness seems to be already there, because your entire, wherever your mind goes, that destination is perceptible only through awareness. That is why it is faster than the mind. That's the meaning. See, you have to take the implied meanings in all these observations. Maybe not even the literal meaning, but the implied meaning. What is the meaning of it is faster than the mind? It's due to its presence that the mind is functioning. And whatever the mind knows or intuits or finds, it is in the presence of the self. Due to your self-awareness, the mind is functioning. So it is already there wherever the mind goes. This is what they are trying to tell us. Then, having preceded the mind, that is why it is there before the mind. It precedes your mind, it precedes your senses. See, the whole idea in Vedanta is, it is due to the presence of consciousness that awareness arises in the mind, mental awareness, what we call. Due to that, your senses start functioning. So this rise of mental awareness is all that you register. You don't know what is behind that. if mental awareness arises, what is its source? So for that you require a little discipline to go to the source of that mental awareness, and that is the self. So that is why it precedes both the mind activity as well as the sense activity. It is behind all of these, and that's why it's invisible, you can't see it, because senses are turned outward and the mind is also turned outward for most of us, isn't it? So then how will you know what is behind it? That is why tapasya and sadhana. So this is how they are describing the self. It is beyond the reach of the senses, and ever steady, it outstrips all that runs. So obviously it is beyond the reach of the senses. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha. This is how it is described. That it is that pure being from which both mind and senses return, unable to touch it. And it is so steady, yet it outstrips all that runs. Because wherever your senses go, whatever they see, whatever they hear, whatever your mind thinks, it is only in the light of awareness that is happening. So whatever is the destination of your gaze, the self is already there. It's a poetic way of saying, in awareness you perceive, in awareness you see and think and feel and hear and touch. In the absence of awareness, will any of this mean anything? Think and see. Suppose you were not a self-aware entity. We can take the example of a robot. He is not self-aware, okay? He is doing all the activity, but it doesn't mean anything to him. There is no first-person experience of his activity with him. But he is doing all the activity. The mobile phone in your hands, it's doing all the activity, but no self-awareness. It has no sense of itself. And because it is not aware, it does not experience. The robot does not experience as we do, but you experience every little thing. Your thought, your emotion, your perceptions mean so much to you. The cognitive process is your very identity. For the simple reason, you are self-aware. Catch this essential point. The expression of pure consciousness within you is the self-awareness in your mind, fundamentally. After that comes the thought process. So because you are a self-aware entity, you experience life. See, look at the connections between consciousness, life, awareness and perceptions. Because you are conscious, deep, you have consciousness as the core, the very seat of your being. That is why there is mental awareness. Because there is mental awareness, a thought process means something to you. Because you have the thought process, you tend to identify with the body, with the senses, and thus relate with the world of objects outside. It all starts with the Atman, pure consciousness, which you are. But we don't think in this manner at all, isn't it? Look at our education process, it's so wonderful. To say in the least. There is everything about the external world, from quarks to quasars, everything you know. You know what is happening on Jupiter. You know what is happening in the nebulae and the quasars in the universe. You know what is happening in other galaxies and clusters, but you don't know what is happening in yourself. This is the great enigma of our education system. There is nothing to tell you how does the energy work in your body, how is your mind working, what your thought and emotion is about, why do you feel the way you feel. Is there any knowledge about this? So you have become an alien to yourself, but you know everything about the external world. So tomorrow you people will be changing all this. Once you understand the value of this knowledge, who will not be interested in it? It's to do with you. So then, let's proceed. Then the Upanishad says, by its mere presence, by the Atman's mere presence, it enables the cosmic energy to sustain the activities of living beings. So this cosmic energy is what is called prana, pran shakti jo hum kehte hain. So this pran, what is its source? It is consciousness. You know, elsewhere the Upanishad will tell us, prana is satyam. So atma is satyasya satyam. It is the truth of this truth of pran. When pran escapes the body falls. This is what is called death. So that important is the vital energy in your system. It's an expression of the cosmic energy, Shakti. Its expression on the individual front in the Vyashti is pran, pran Shakti. Now this pran Shakti has a motivating factor. What is it that motivates your pran? It is consciousness. So that is why it is the ultimate seat of all your activities, of your entire perceptive process, of your thought process, of your cognitions, affections, meditations, of action, of the Jnanendriyas and Karmendriyas. Jnanendriyas are your senses, Karmendriyas are your motor organs. So the source of this entire thing is the self within you. This is what they are saying. It activates you from within, it energizes you from within, and through the vital energy functioning in your body, you execute actions at every level. So this is your core, the core truth about your personality. But we never touch upon this. See, this is the great thing. When I say I only think of what I am attached to. A clear sense of I-ness based on pure awareness. This rarely comes to us. That is why we always insist on sadhana. It is in those times that you will understand the fact about me is that I am just aware. Bare awareness is the most fundamental fact about me. Even the thought process is external to that. So this much you should be able to capture in first person for this Upanishad to make sense, and then we will proceed further. Check and see in your most quiet moments, and when you get up first thing early in the morning, you are just aware. Not exactly identified with anything. Then gradually you become body conscious and start relating with, identifying with objects around you. But awareness, that is why we say, is so fundamental to your being that you miss it, you don't acknowledge it. But this Upanishad is helping you, pointing out to the truth of your own experience. The more meditation you practice, the more this will become very clear. Look at the next mantra, the fifth one. Tadejati, tannaijati, taddūre, tadvantike, tadantarasya sarvasya, tadu sarvasyāsya bāhyataḥ. You know, it's the typical language of Ishopanishad, quite enigmatic. You see how they are describing the Atman further. Tat-ejati, it moves. That time they told us it's motionless. Now they are saying it moves, and tat-na-ejati, it moves not. That is also its characteristic. Because it enables everything else to function, the mind, the senses. It is what enables everything to function. That is why they are saying it moves. In its real nature, it is immovable, but in its conditioned aspect, it is what enables everything else to move, isn't it? That is why they are saying it moves. And in its real nature, it moves not. It is far and it is near. It is far. If you are standing on the senses, from the standpoint of the senses and the mind, it is far, isn't it? Just now we don't perceive it because we are identified with the mind, with the body. So it appears far, and yet it is very near. It is your very being. You are the self, and donning this body-mind complex to function in this world. So it's your very being. So that's why it is far and yet near. This is how it is described. And it is within all this and also outside all this. See, the self is actually both transcendent and immanent. It is, from the standpoint of consciousness, there is no other. Everything that is within that awareness is verily that awareness. What do we mean to say? You see, like for example, let me give you an example. Anything that is within your body, when you are identified with the body, you say it is you, isn't it? Your leg is you, your hand is you, all the organs are you. So also whatever is within awareness, when you are identified with awareness, that is verily you, not yours, you. So that is why they are saying it is within all this and yet outside all this. It is all that there is. It is the transcendent and the immanent reality of life. So see, this is a very beautiful description of the Atman, the self which you are, the core of existence, pure being, Sat, Chit, Ananda, which you are. This is the description being given in mantra number 5. So you see, it's a very beautiful description, I would say, isn't it? How else would you describe consciousness? So in all these ways they are trying to give us the idea. Let's go to the 6th mantra. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyevānupashyati sarva bhuteshu chatmanam tato na vijugupsate. This is also very interesting. Yatu, that the wise one who sees sarvani bhutani atmani, who sees all beings in the Atman, in the self, anupashyati, one who sees it like this, and sarva bhuteshu cha atmanam, he sees all beings in the self and the self in all beings. Tata, he, from this knowledge, na vijugupsate, he cannot reject anything, he cannot hate. Actually vijugupsa means hate. So he cannot remove anything from the reality because he cannot hate, because he sees all beings in himself and himself in all beings. So you see, this is the perception born of self-knowledge. When one sees the reality of one's being reflected in everything, when you know yourself to be pure consciousness, you will see everything is verily pure consciousness itself. And that same thing is again in you. You are in all is in you. That's the perception. This experience has been beautifully described at several places in the Bhagavad Gita. One verse comes to my mind, sarvabhutastham sarvabhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha. So the same idea, you see, sarvabhutastham seeing all beings in oneself, sarvabhutani chatmani, seeing himself in all beings and all beings in himself. Who sees this? Ikshate yoga yuktatma, one who has attained to the heights of yoga, one who has understood the self through the process of yoga. He sees sarvatra samadarshanaha, he sees sameness in all beings, the same thing in all beings. So you see, the essential point that's why is to become yoga rudha, to become one established in yoga, yogastha. Then this perception becomes possible. This perception is not imagination. This perception is not the creation of a thought process. This perception is not an idea. Please note this. This perception is not a belief. It is not a vikalpa. It is not somebody's ideology. It is a transformation of one's consciousness, as a result of which this is the unitary vision one gets. A vision of all inclusiveness, a vision of actual unity. So when your own consciousness gets transformed, or in other words, you touch the core of your own being, you will see the same being in everything around you. So I think to understand this experience, you have to go into the lives of realized masters, and you will see how true this has been in their lives. Look at the life of Sri Ramakrishna. He used to actually say everything. You will find this in many places in the gospel. Many times he says this. I actually see he alone has become all this. The master would say this. I see he has become these men, women, children, even these buildings. this garden, everything, it's like a wax garden where everything is made of wax. He would say this. And what's that wax? It's consciousness, Brahman, pure divine consciousness. It is manifesting as all of this. He would see it like that. Once, Sri Ramakrishna suddenly said, as one sees the world, the earth, when it is soaked in rain, so I see the whole manifested world is soaked in Brahman. So you see, the perception at that level is of this kind. You can't translate that perception into a kind of intellectual or cognitive activity. It must come through the yogic process, through the process of meditation. There are great Vedantic meditations based on this also, on perception of unity. And you will see things like that. That is why you see, this is the reality of life. And what we are seeing is the skewed vision born of identification with a convoluted mind and body complex. This is the pure vision of the Rishi, pure vision of the seer, who has cleared himself of all these convolutions, who clearly sees himself as the self, pure being. He will have this kind of perception. So the essential thing is the transformation of one's own consciousness. I am using this word consciousness here, I don't mean pure consciousness essentially, but the transformation of one's mind. That is what I mean by transformation of consciousness, so that it touches the reality of pure consciousness, the Atman. Then one's perception becomes like this. That is why you see, ikshate yoga yukta atma. What does he see? Sarvatra samadarshana. He sees the same being everywhere. Then let's go to the next mantra. Yasmin sarvani bhutani atmaivā bhūt vijanatah tatra ko moha ka shoka ekatvam anupashyatah. See, it's the real outpouring of a realized sage. He says, Yasmin, when Atma Vijanata, the knower knows the self, and eva verily sarvani bhutani abhut, he becomes one with all beings. When he knows his own self, he becomes one with all beings. He experiences ekatvam anupashyatah. He beholds oneness. He sees the same being everywhere. For such a one, ko moha ka shoka. Ekatvam anupashyata. One who sees this oneness, what moha can he have? Moha is delusive attachment, delusion. And shoka is sorrow. They go together. So what moha or shok will a person have who has this unitary vision? So check and see, when we don't see reality as it is, we make up reality through our mind. Such a mental activity can cause all this shok, moh, the shadripus, because it's a invented something. You have assumed something. Your mind has created this reality. It is your psychological space. But existential reality is the oneness of consciousness, pure being. So one who touches that will escape all this, the psychological melodrama which we go on cooking up because we have no awareness. Our mind has not touched that level of pure awareness. So we keep cooking up things in our minds to feel a little comfort, to feel a little pleasure. That is your psychological space. You have given it the greatest reality. You don't know anything beyond it. That is why all are suffering. When you get out of touch with reality as it is, pure truth, then you will suffer. It is called alienation of one's being from the truth of one's being. So this creates the suffering. You see, a person may have everything in his life, still there's a pall of suffering. You can see this, especially what's called the midlife crisis. It is based on this. Once you turn 40, 45, well, you had your dream job, you had your dream home, you created your dream family, your dream relationships, you did everything the way you wanted it. Still there is a lingering sorrow in the heart. It is because of this. happiness is an exponential function of pure awareness. Unless you touch it, sorrow will hang heavy in your life, no matter what you have. You wanted things the way you wanted them, you brought them into your lives, still you suffer. For the simple reason, the mind has not touched its source. So you see, this is what is called existential sorrow. It can only be overcome by touching the core of your existence, which is the Atman. This is so true of our psychological front that you can discover it for yourself. This is not a theory. What is it that fundamentally causes sorrow to the human mind is it's being out of touch with awareness. And the more aware you are to any process you can generate it, the more deeply conscious you are from within. Not awareness due to an object, not awareness of an object, but by itself. The more aware you are, the more deeply conscious you become, you will see the higher will be the energy, the vital energy in your system, and the happier will your mind remain. It's almost an equation, a mathematical equation, it's a formula. The higher the level of awareness, the higher will be your happiness. You will be genuinely happy, not happy due to an object which is a variable again. You are not dependent upon anything to be happy. You can bring things into your life as you require, but your happiness is assured within yourself. So this is a possibility with your life if you manufacture self-knowledge, if you touch the self. Otherwise, you are at the mercy of objects and people to keep you engaged and happy. Please note this. I am not talking of any theory, this is the reality of our lives. You will be dependent on synthetic joys if you don't develop this level of awareness, if you don't culture it, if you don't take up spiritual practice seriously. You will require somebody or something to keep you happy. And that also temporarily and transitorily and unfulfillingly, nothing permanent about it. So what do we invest finally our entire system into? That is all that matters. That is why self-knowledge was an essential part of the educational process in Vedic India. You must become independent of everything around you and perfectly capable of manufacturing your happiness, your inner balance, your clear thought by yourself, and not require a gadget or something else or somebody else to keep you balanced. This was fundamental. Should this not be fundamental to the education process? Tell me. If we have to really develop as a generation, not just increasing our survival needs, but truly develop into a species which has truly conquered itself, not just conquering the planet, conquered itself, then we will require this knowledge absolutely. And this is what they are telling us here. See, the next description also is very profound of the Atman, which they are going to give us in the next mantra. Sa paryaga chukrama mavranam asnaviram shuddham apapavidham kavir manishi paribhu swayambhu yatha taddhāvato'nyānatyeti vyadadha shashvatibhya samabhyah. He, the Atman, is swayambhu. It is self-existent. In fact, it is the only thing that is self-existent. Everything else borrows existence from it. We will discuss this idea. And then paryagat, it is all-pervading. Shukram, it is pure and radiant by its very nature. Akayam, without body. Asnaviram, without muscles. Apapavidham, untainted by sin, absolutely pure. And avranam, scathless, which means whole. Shuddham, pure. Kavi means enlightened or all-seeing, one who has cleared his perception. Manishi, all-knowing. Paribhu, encompassing all. And he, saha, yatha tathyata, in the proper way, shashvatibhya samabhya arthan vyadadhat, which means he ordains or gives duties to all that is functioning. He assigns duties to, here it is given as Prajapati, but to everything that is functioning in this universe, it is this self that assigns duty, as it were. So what are they telling us here? The nature of the self, the Atman is being described. He is self-existent. See, please understand this, not that the Atman is existing. Whatever is existing at its core, it is the Atman. It is existence itself. Anything else, what is appearing as an object to you, it does not have independent existence in itself. Look at this chair on which I am sitting, or this table here. It is wood in a particular name and form, but I have made the name of chair and table an absolute reality. I don't see the wood when I say table and chair, but the only reality here is wood in a particular name and form. Name and form have become so real to me, I don't see the wood, I only see chair or table, because it is of utilitarian value to me. This has happened with the whole of creation, Vedanta tells us. Nothing has absolute reality in itself. The name was given, the form was given, made according to our needs. It has utilitarian value. It doesn't have absolute value. It will not remain permanent. It is not, there is no permanent nature to it. It will transform. Any object around you, please check and see. There is no self-existence to it. You render it existent. So, self-existent entity is only the Atman, only consciousness. Everything else is name and form superimposed on consciousness, to which my mind gives great reality because I am using it. I am using the chair, I am using the table. So I can, I put the wood aside a little. But the reality here is only wood. The reality of manifested world, the reality of all manifestation is only Brahman, upon which names and forms are superimposed. The name and form has no reality in itself. This is what they are telling us. So the self-existent one is only the Atman. Like the reality of, in those days, everything would be made out of mud. So they would give this example, that the jar or the pot, the ladle, everything is nothing but clay. The reality is clay in a particular name, in a particular form. So these are the common examples used in the Vedanta, in the Upanishads, to drive home this point, that pure existence only belongs to the Atman. Everything else has borrowed existence, which is of the nature of name and form superimposed on a more basic substratum. They would give the example of ornaments. You give absolute existence to a necklace or a ring or bracelets, whatever, but actually it is only gold in a particular form with a particular name. So you must learn to see the gold in the ornament, the water in the wave, the wood in the chair or table, and you will learn to see the self in everything that is manifested. Because that is the reality about it. That is the core reality. The rest are name and form based, and a whole lot of intricate things related to that. But it has become absolute reality in our minds, not in existence, not in the existence. When one awakens to this knowledge, the way the mind categorizes things divisively will appear to be real maya or mithya, what is called. It's a creation of the mind. The Vedanta also speaks of this. There is something called God's creation and something called your creation. Jiva Srishti, your creation, and Ishwar Srishti, that is God's creation. God's creation is the reality of being, which is spread all over everywhere. It is all that there is. Your creation is man, woman, child, this particular being, that particular being, all good people, bad people, and fair people, unfair people, corrupt people, all our creation, creation of the human mind. Please see, all of these attributes come from the mind. Our sense of right and wrong comes from the mind. But the perception of the seer is always unitary, one consciousness, manifesting through all of this. So this is why they are saying he alone is self-existent, the Atman. The rest are borrowing existence from that. He is everywhere, without a body. In fact, your body, through your thought process, appears in your awareness. Check out and see just now if this is true or not. Your body is not an independent, absolute entity in itself. You can see it only through a thought process, and it can happen only in awareness. So awareness is so primary. Once you learn to think like this, you will understand this is the only reality. Vedanta is talking of the absolute pure reality of life. In your awareness, through a thought process, you are identified with a body. Suppose you stop that thought process, you will have no connection with this body. It is as much an object as anything else. But yet you call this I. The body does not come and say I, okay? I say I am the body. I, the conscious entity and agent, somehow got mixed up with this object, and I claim I am the body. So this is what is called the basic error or adhyas, which is constantly happening in our mind. So we have assumed a whole lot of things to be absolutely true. Vedanta is helping us understand that, investigate into this and understand that no, the reality is like this, the rest is assumed reality, conditioned reality. So that is why the self alone is everywhere, without a body, without muscles, obviously, without the taint of sin. It is absolutely taintless. It is radiant, whole and pure, and it is what sees all, knows all and encompasses all, and it is what is responsible for anything that is performing duty or which is in motion. It is the source of all activity. In one of the Upanishads it is described as Brahman. It is due to the fear of Brahman that everything functions as it is functioning. Indra functions as he is functioning, Agni functions, fire functions, water does its whatever functions, only because of the presence of Brahman. So this is what they are trying to say, that at the heart of everything is consciousness. If you were not a self-conscious entity, you would never perceive any activity anywhere, because the perceptions of your mind have for their source consciousness. In your awareness you perceive. Please see this. If you were not aware, you would not perceive. You would not know what is there. So reality does not absolutely lie on the objective end. You only perceive as much of the object as your senses will allow you to, isn't it? Out of the entire range of electromagnetic radiation, as much of visible light, which is a very small spectrum there, only that much you are perceiving, and that also through these 5 senses if they are in proper order. So you have limited reality to your equipment. You are only enabled to perceive that much, and that also only if you are aware. In your awareness you perceive. So what is more fundamentally true, your perception or your awareness? That is why they are telling you the heart of it all is awareness, pure awareness, consciousness is the Atman. That is the reality of your life and being. Don't ignore that and take a long jump outside. Understand this, revel in this, and then see what is outside, and you will see things in their proper place. You will give things the importance they deserve and not otherwise.